Okay, again, thank you everyone for coming. We had a pretty good number register, and we got a decent number here now, and hopefully more will be joining us as we go along. Um, my name is Gus Griffin. I'm with the Ujima People's Progress Party, and we are here tonight to have a discussion about what is socialism. We um, we uh, we invest a lot in criticizing capitalism as it should be criticized, but if we don't offer an alternative, then there's really nowhere to go. We can't just criticize what is. We have to offer what can be and show in pragmatic ways how it can be. So that's what we want to try to start the conversation to do tonight. And so what I'd like you to do, some of you have already done it. If you haven't done so already, please um, enter into the chat, introduce yourself by name, organization you may represent, and how you found out about this event. That's how we can find out how our marketing efforts are working. We greatly appreciate that, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Um, so the first thing I wanted to talk about is just kind of just get us started with some icebreakers, and I wanted to sort of just give ask some questions, and we'd like to see what the answers come out, what your answers are. We're going to give you the answers later on, but I want to just pose these questions, and I'm going to write them in the chat, but I'm going to pose them to you so you just give some thought to it right now, and then again we're going to answer these questions later on. Just kind of keep you hanging. That's an old education technique that we learned years ago. Um, so the first question I want to let me make sure I got everybody in here. We got a couple more people. All right, I got this. Join. Yeah, okay. All right. We got a good problem. A lot of people joining. All right. So, first question I want to pose to you, and again, I'm going to put these in writing in the chat after we get started. Um, Myth or reality? Socialists are atheists. Myth or reality? Socialists are atheists. That's question one. Question two would be socialists only care about class oppression, not other forms of oppression. Socialists only care about class oppression, not other forms of oppression. Question two. And question three, socialism has no historical roots in the United States. True or false? Socialism has no historical roots in the United States. So those are the three questions. Again, I'm going to add them in the chat so that you can ponder over them. If you want to go ahead and cheat and look them up, whatever the case may be, that's fine because we're going to have a little discussion about it later on. We can do that, and we can uh, have a little discussion about it later on. There are other questions we can ask, certainly. And all right. So while you ponder on those, and I'm gonna get ready to put these in the chat, as I said, I'm gonna turn it over to my comrade Amadi to start the next portion.
Peace, Gus. Appreciate that. All right, let me go ahead and share my screen. Mhm. Slideshow up, Gus.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So, first of all, thanks everybody for being here. I really appreciate y'all coming out on a Tuesday. It's decently nice outside, so you could be anywhere, but you decided to be here with us for a little while, so we appreciate that. And we hope to make this worth your time. So, like the brother Gus said, my name is Amadi Sankara. I've been with Ujima People's Progress Party for about 5 years now. Mostly focusing on tenant organizing and just general environmental organizing, labor organizing, all type of stuff like that. So one of the things we want to talk about today, before we really get into the meat of the conversation, is to define first what an economy is. I mean, I think there's a lot of different things we've been told about what the economy is and how things get from where they start to where they at in your table in your home, stuff like that. So we wanted to just set some ground ideas and kind of get some terms out there that we've heard and make sure we're all on the same page, at least have an idea what we're going to discuss going forward. So, two things we want to consider. How does a house become a house? How does your home, how does four walls and the ceiling in the backyard and everything, how does that go from the timber yards, from the concrete, whatever it is. How does that go from where that's at to where it gets at on your neighborhood? How does the food? How does a tomato get from the ground to
Hey,
your
Freddie.
supermarket? Electricity.
They in class.
How does power
Mhm.
get from wherever it's generated at into your house? And then what determines, matter of fact, well, who determines what businesses come into your community? If your community wanted to decide to have, a medical clinic versus a liquor store, what is it that's in your way of deciding whether that comes to your community or not? So we just wanted to have some of these as we make our way through this presentation.
Oh my God.
Hey, Gus, can you mute yourself?
That's not me.
Okay.
Let me check out and see what it is.
Yeah, okay, appreciate it. But yeah, as we move our way through as we move our way through the presentation and talk today, we just want to have some of these ideas in mind, just to consider. So, what is an economy? So, I decided to go with the very bare bones mainstream definition of what an economy is to ground us. The economy is a system of production, distribution, and the consumption of goods and services. So that's the whatever. Then that can be any type of thing. That can be, like I said, a tomato that gets from the ground to the supermarket, a shirt that goes from cotton to the gab, whatever it is. It's the process of how that becomes what it is in the final product. And one of the things we want to point out is that, when you're talking about the economy, you're talking about what people are familiar with. A lot of folks tend to think that certain things only exist in a capitalist economy. So if you ask somebody, to define capitalism, a lot of times they'll just say a transaction. I bought this from somebody because we wanted to sell this, so therefore I'm participating in capitalism. You participate in capitalism because you live under it, but that's not. But what you just did was commerce. That isn't particular to capitalism as it stands. That can exist in many type of different systems. Markets as well. Markets are one of the things you tend to hear about as measuring, a housing market, a clothing market, a car market, whatever it is. Those are also not particular to capitalism. You see those existing in many other economic systems. Those are just ways that goods are distributed in exchange between people. Production is the process that transforms those resources into useful goods and services. So the production is the process of on a cotton gin, the cotton that goes from the ground and it gets processed and turned into something that's easily distributable would be the production process in that. The distribution would be the planes, the trains, the automobiles, everything that's involved in getting that from the warehouse that maybe is overseas in China, India, Vietnam to wherever it's being sold at in America, wherever it's being sold at in Europe, anywhere like that. And the value is how and is the worth or the good of a service, which is determined by a bunch of different factors under capitalism. Mostly, it's not determined by what you value as a citizen. And I put a few asterisks next to the means of production because when you talk about socialism, capitalism, communism, all these type of isms, the means of production are key points, and that tends to be what people are familiar with when they talk about somebody seizing those means of production. And we're going to talk about what that means, and later on in the presentation. But basically, the means of production is everything that's involved in the raw materials and labor, tools and machines that are used in the production of the production that turns things into goods and services. So it is the factory where Amazon workers work at, and then to make sure things get from Amazon warehouses to your front porch. It's the shipping line that makes sure things get from overseas. It's the privatized roads. It's all those different type of things that make sure those products go from the production side, the distribution side to the final product. Capitalist economy. So we want to talk about what distinguishes a capitalist economy in terms of how it operates, right? And from what we know of it throughout history, it means that the raw materials, the means of production that we talked about before, all those tools and machines, including your labor, is employed by the 1%. When we talk about the 1%, those are people that we're talking about. We're talking about the people that make the decision over your life in ways that you may not even realize. They're the ones that decide ultimately where a house gets built. They're the ones that decide, how water gets divided into your communities. They're the ones that decide where data centers get put in your communities to this very day. If they want to use up resources, use up capital to further expand their market reach, they're going to do that because they own the means of productions. Examples would be, like we said before, the Amazon warehouses. Software like Uber. Uber is ubiquitous. Uber is everywhere. Uber to this point is just it's even you could even call it almost a beneficial good for the public because folks that can't, if you're disabled and you need somewhere to get to your doctor's appointment, having Uber there is a very useful commodity, a very useful thing. If you live in the more disconnected parts of the country, disconnected parts of the state, being able to call a car to get to you is actually a very useful thing. But once again, that is not owned by the workers that actually drive those cars around. It's owned by the tech oligarchs, tech capitalists, whatever you want to call them. Public infrastructure. More and more parts of our infrastructure are being privatized. whether that's beaches, whether that's the water that's being privatized to make sure these data centers can get powered up, whether that's the roads that allow the trucks to move product from wherever they have to be. Those are constantly and more being privatized by the capitalists so that they can own and decide how those products get moved around. Banks as well, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, whatever evil corporation bank you think of, none of those are owned by us, the people. They're owned and their decisions are decided by people who are so disconnected from us that we don't even know their faces. And then last of all, you don't own your labor under capitalism. When you go to work, you decide to work 8 hours a day, you don't you by within the first few hours you're working in a lot of your jobs, you've already made the money that you're going to make that covers your lights, that covers your food, that covers a few other things, and then the rest of that is called surplus. Your boss and your person that your boss answers to, they're the ones that get a chance to take all that extra labor that you work every single day, and it doesn't go to you. So you don't own your labor wherever you work at. Then the dynamics of exploitation, everything's produced for profit over social need. If there's probably the one common analogy that most of us have heard before is that, if they could cure cancer, they probably wouldn't do it because it wouldn't make as much profit. There's more profit to be made in having cancer medication that stretches your sickness out versus having the medication that cure you. Within capitalism, there's the idea of planned obsolescence, and it's the idea that if you have a washing machine, that washing machine can actually last for a little bit while if you actually choose to, but you're not the best parts aren't put in there, the best engineering isn't put in there because it's meant to disintegrate over time, so that you're running back to get more dishwashers. So it's not production isn't done with the environment in mind, isn't done with pockets in mind. It's done to extract as much profit as much profit as possible. And also, as we're going to talk about a little more later, care work is devalued, hard to commodify. So the raising children, cooking in the homes, all those type of things that we don't even think of that actually sustain people and sustain life. Those things aren't valued and aren't given proper value under capitalism. But they are important because they keep you as a worker coming back the next day. And so we also want people to think about who are you in the system. Used to be where this may have been a lot more easy to see in terms of if we were this was early 1800s or the early 1900s, we would have been workers in a factory somewhere, and then the boss would have been the owner of the factory, and it was very easy to see that person is the one that controls my life. But now, as the economy has stretched, has become more globalized, as capitalism is more global, it doesn't necessarily look as clean as the boss and the worker. There's middle parts within that. There's the petite bourgeois class we've always had, small business owners, artisans, small scale landlords. You still have them to this day, even though a lot of their property is being gobbled up by BlackRock and other conglomerates. We also have a professional managerial class who also tends to be the ones that like the middle managers, so to speak. It could be corporate, could be lawyers, judges, stuff like that, who they have a certain amount of, excuse me, control and power, but not they don't exercise as much control as a capitalist does, or as somebody who may own a small piece of land does. And then for the rest of us, we're all in this little section right here: warehouse, unionized, unemployed, excluded, disabled, whatever you are. If you have to sell your labor on a labor market, you are in this precarious class, this underclass, this despised class. The majority of us are in this class right here. And what actually has happened historically is that sometimes this class links up with this class because we all realize how precarious our circumstances are. And unfortunately, you're starting to see some of that now with a lot of the wealth that was built in Black communities that came from government jobs. Those are now being stripped away. So you have 300,000, 400,000 Black women who've lost their job during this Trump administration's reign. And a lot of those jobs were federal jobs that we were able to get post civil rights, and that brought a lot of wealth into our communities. And now you're seeing how it's very easy to go from maybe it's professional managerial class right back down to precarious class because we don't own our power. So think about where you are, think about where you thought you are in the system, and just kind of reorient that to where we are today. Because we are a Black working class party, we want to focus on what slavery and the economy has had on our lives as Black people. Because at a certain point, the economy, everything that we talked about that was involved in that, the markets, the commerce, the distribution, the means of production, that was Black people. Those were our bodies. Our labor produced the harvested cotton, tobacco, and sugar in the Americas. And I say Americas because it's important to realize that this happened in North America, Central America, South America. It was cotton up here, tobacco. It was sugar down in the Caribbeans. It was coffee down in Brazil. Wherever it was, the commodity that was to be sold on the external market, It was our hands that produced that, and then the market that existed to purchase those things, it was a slave market. So our bodies were the things that were being trafficked on the market back and forth. The commerce that was being exchanged was us. The commerce was our bodies. The commerce was our children. The production. Chattel slavery means that your child is when your child is born, that child is not free. That child becomes another piece of labor that a slave owner gets to use, and that whether that's a housemaid, whether it's a blacksmith, whatever it is, that child that's produced is automatically produced as another point of labor. And then distribution. Every story that you've heard of an enslaved family being ripped apart is a part of that distribution network. We want to get these slaves from this plantation in Baltimore to this plantation in New Orleans to this plantation in Haiti. So all of our bodies were part of this very large distribution network to make sure our labor was exploited as much as possible. And as you can see, our work represented the southern plaintiff's most significant investment in the bulk of their wealth. And even to this day. So we tend to know about what slavery has done to us, so, the economics of slavery. But even to this day, I would encourage anybody to read this book. It's called How Capitalism Underdeveloped Black America. And it specifically talks about what capitalism has done to us in the cities and in the states. And one of the things that it points out is that the slave cutters are gone, but the prisons still exist. The police still exists, and those things historically. And I'm not sure if most people notice is that when you've seen pictures of folks hanging from a tree, there wasn't just wanton violence. It wasn't just indiscriminate violence, although it was also that. A lot of times, somebody was lynched in order to discipline their labor. It could have been a tenant farmer who was trying to get their just due from their work on the farm. And instead of just giving them their worth, they were lynched instead. And it could have been if you were an organizer from the Communist Party going down south to organize workers, you were going to be lynched. There was a good chance you were going to be lynched because once again, that violence was also used to discipline your labor as well. And the structural exclusion as well. The Baltimore Black Workers Center, which actually shout out to the Conrad 90 who Ujima, who's actually done a lot of work with that. They showed that a lot of our black workers, a lot of us are trapped in low wage, unstable jobs. And that's not, and that is by design. It's not because we can't do the work, it's because we're not allowed to do the work in those a lot of instances. And because that our labor it has historically been used to also discipline white labor. So instead of white labor and black labor coming together and actually realizing our common interests, it was a lot of times in the majority of white unions who would refuse to bring black folks in there, and then those black folks were used as scabs. It's the same thing to this day where you'll have people putting black folks and Latinos against each other, and Latinos being used as that same reserve labor. So through every version of this, they've always used all the excuses in the world to say that black, white, whoever, all working class don't have anything in common. But the truth is that we've always been put against each other for the benefit of the capitalists. And then the idea that black capitalism is a trap. You see it now with the presence of Oprah, the presence of LeBron, the presence of many black folks with a lot of money has not done anything to change the circumstance of black folks every day. We are still struggling with poverty. We are still struggling with homelessness. We're still struggling with all types of every metric you can think of. Black folks at the bottom of it when it comes to health and being in this country. That has not changed with the presence of a whole bunch of black folks that got a lot of money. And then last point is that the super exploitation of black women. Everything that we put on top of that, you can also add race, class, and gender to combine the higher profits that we talked about earlier, the unpaid care work and low wages. So, but we also want to point to how is it maintained? Because this doesn't just exist in a vacuum, right? I wanted to put an eviction notice up here because I want everybody to just take a look at it and just kind of get an idea of who's involved in getting this to your door if it comes there. The state has to approve this in the first place. The laws have to be set in place to enforce the property rights of your landlord that would even get you kicked out of the house in the first place. The laws and judges had to be constructed in a way that makes sure that you will never have the right power to fight against your landlords. And lastly, the police. The police, that sheriff's department you see on there, they are the armed force of the state and the law and the judges to make sure that, hey, if you did have a problem with you being kicked out of your home, if you just happen to lose your job, if you got medical bills that put you in debt, whatever it is, it doesn't matter because you're going kicked out of the house from either the police or the private army, which tends to be whoever they can hire, unregulated, even less so than the cops. But the point is, there's a strong implication of violence if you don't follow the property rights that have been set in stone over 100 some years. And so now you want to talk about what does socialist economy look like and how does that differ from what we've seen before? We talked about the means of production, the land, the trains, the everything being owned by 1%. In the social economy, the idea is that we are the ones as a people and as a community that own those same materials. If it's our labor that produces this value, if it's our labor that if our labor moves these entire industries, then it should be us that determine what we do with that labor, what we do with those machines. The fact that we was in software, instead of it being owned by 1% in Silicon Valley or whoever, the people that actually work at the tech companies, the people that actually impacted by those, they have a say in how those things are run. Public infrastructure. If you know we're not if there's a beach that's there, we're not letting that beach be hauled off by some rich asshole who just happens to have like a little bit of piece of land. Like that land is for the people, and then people are able to enjoy that land. We're able to keep that land in common with the people. Banking, the idea of a public bank. I don't think most people realize that by banking doesn't just have to be a Wells Fargo, Bank of America, JP Morgan, whatever it is. The banking, there's public banks that exist that invest in community infrastructure that exists for the benefit of the community. That is a possibility that exists even to this day. And as a worker, you own the full labor, you own the full value of your actual labor. When you go to work, you be confident that if I go to work and I work 8 hours, then what I'm getting back is the full 8 hours that I worked. And then that 8 hours and when the value produced over that 8 hours from me and my coworkers, we are all getting that value back and we all can determine what we're going to do with that value. Democratic planning. If most people don't even realize that you have no, even if you go and vote for a charter amendment for, something in your local laws, that is brought to you after the fact. It's been argued behind closed doors. It's been compromised all hell. But the idea is before it even gets to that point, you have a say in how your community gets planned. If your community needs houses, then your community has a say in whether houses get built in your community. If your community needs grocery stores, if your community needs whatever your community needs to be healthy, you have a say you have a say in that development in your community. And then things in general, social good over profit. We don't produce things just for the sake of making money. If it makes money, but if it's going to destroy our community, then we don't want it in there. We actually want to produce things that are going to be for the benefit of our society at large. And care work. So I wanted to dig more deeper into and kind of talk about the history of care work and
I
how care
know.
work has been underrated in terms of the value that it produce in terms of just us as working people. And I wanted to point to a few different people throughout history. Angela Davis, and I think it became
Just
out in the
1 minute.
70s.
Just 1 minute. Please put yourselves on mute. I'm trying to figure out who it is. But if you can put yourselves on mute if you're not up, I'd greatly appreciate it.
You appreciate that, Gus. So yeah, I just want to highlight the fact that care work and what we've been. This is one of the probably most interesting things that I found in my readers in terms of the idea behind the social economy versus capitalist economy. And I think what I find interesting about it is that I've never heard of these things being perceived as something that can actually help free a good portion of our society, right? So Angela Davis talked about how childcare should be socialized, meal preparation should be socialized, housework should be industrialized and readily accessible to working class people throughout history, those things have been available to folks in the higher echelon. Like it's already been accepted that it's kind of hard to raise a whole bunch of kids, so maybe it's good to have a little bit of help. It's kind of hard to raise, to cook for a whole bunch of kids, so maybe it's good to have a little bit of help doing that as well. But it has been like bourgeois, housemaids, whatever like that. But there have been things throughout history who said that no, we should be able to take things like childcare and cooking and stuff like that and socialize it among society and share that burden as a society. Thomas Sankara said that back in the 80s. Resolute action must be undertaken aimed at men as setting up. Hold on. Oops. Let me go back. Lost my. There we go. Set up a large-scale network of social facilities such as nurseries, daycare centers, and cafeterias. This would allow women to be more easily take part in revolutionary debate. The Bolsheviks, back in 1917, created collective laundries, communal kitchens, and nurseries. They instituted social insurance for all women, and divorce was legalized about 50 years before the U.S. did. And one of the main people that was in that revolution, Alexander Kollontai, talked about that the capitalists were aware of how the family system as it was set up was the best weapon against the proletariat achieving its full liberty. And one of the things that they all talked about was they talked about the fact that as a society, we've advanced to the point where we can actually take the burden off of everybody to be able to live full lives. Because socialism is not about just being poor. It's not about being impoverished. It's about developing your full faculties as a human being. And then part of that is just knowing that we have technology to be able to take care of our families in a different way than we've been told. And so I want to just point to a few different examples that exist to this day. The Jackson Kush Plan. The Cooperation Jackson is some dope folks that are doing some real black self-determination down Jackson, Mississippi. They've been doing it for some decades now. I just want to point out the fact that some of the things they do is they work on people's assemblies, which we want to bring in Baltimore as well. It's a vehicle with dual power. It allows community members to exercise autonomous political authority outside of traditional state structures. Assemblies is something that Black folks have been done since post-slavery. It's the way that we all came together as a community to discuss what was going on and how we're going to fix it. And so Cooperation Jackson has been doing an incredible job over the years of having that same thing exist in their own communities. They created a solidarity economy. They built a network of worker-owned cooperatives, land trusted credit unions, and Cooperation Jackson is the person, they're the entity that primarily runs that. And they also actually do engage electoral as well. They don't just ignore the electoral. They understand that until the revolution comes, until we seize those means of productions, the electoral is here, and we have to engage it in a particular way. And they've done a great job of engaging it from their standpoint. The Preston model. This actually is in the UK. This is a local. They have an idea of community wealth building, which I really appreciate. And what it does is they for instance. Let's take Johns Hopkins. Johns Hopkins is an anchor institution that ain't going nowhere, despite what they say. If we wanted to make sure that Johns Hopkins spent in our community, according to this model, we could set up a cooperative that produces the nurses' scrubs and then have a contract that says that Johns Hopkins only gets their scrubs from our work cooperative. And that cooperative is employed by people that work in the community, employed by it. People that live in the community, they benefit from it. But the whole idea is that when we talk about money circulating and how it circulates throughout the economy, there are better ways to keep our money in our community, better ways than black capitalism. And I also want to point to this idea of this cyber set. I'm a bit of a nerd. I'm a bit of a geek. I like to learn about a whole bunch of I like to learn about a whole bunch of tech stuff. And so one of my favorite projects is this thing called Project Cyberset. I encourage anybody to look it up. It was back in the 70s. It was Salvador Allende, who was a democratically elected Marxist president of Chile. And one of the things that he wanted to do is to evolutionize their economy by connecting folks who were in different parts of the country together using computers. And they actually had a working system set up that was kind of precursor to what we see with the internet today. And it was successful in the point that it allowed for better worker engagement at the factory level. It allowed for better coordination of products across the country. And it was so good that it was a threat to the United States. And I think Richard Nixon was the one that said that he wanted to make the economy bleed because he recognized the threat, of having a more democratic way to plan the economy. And in Baltimore, we have our own history of cooperatives, and more particularly this man named Isaac Myers. Isaac Myers did a lot of things. Chief amongst which was starting the National Colored Labor Union with Frederick Douglass back in the day, but he also started the Colored Caulkers Trade Union Society that formed a cooperative down at Baltimore shipyards. Baltimore is a port city. We have a lot of reasons. We have a lot of money that comes through that port, and Black folks have been working down there for a long, long time. And one of the things he was able to do was just was form a cooperative that allowed workers to pull the resources together to be able to buy raise $10,000 black residents. They borrowed 30,000 per shipyard, and they actually ended up employing 300 black hawkers and white workers as well. And so that was way before that we've had the cooperatives that we've had today. Isaac Myers and a lot of black folks back then were already setting up various cooperatives throughout the city to make sure there's more equitable distribution of our resources. So just wanted to lay the foundation for our talk, lay the foundation what we're going to talk about later with our guests in terms of what's possible, and what has existed within our, within the world. You go ahead, Gus.
Thank you, comrade. Thank you very much for that. That was a mouthful and a lot of information, and we're gonna follow up with some links for y'all. Are we going to Taji next?
So, yep, you can go ahead, interview Taji, and then you got the
Okay,
question, correct? Yep.
okay. Now I can't look at his bio. I remember some of it because I'm want to record and you can't share, but I do know that Taji Amani is a holds an international relations degree from Stanford University. He's worked in a great deal, many of efforts around Baltimore City in terms of promoting cooperatives and a different way of looking at things from the private to the public. He's a dear friend, and we consider him coming back home. So I'm gonna, without further ado, and I'm doing his bio no justice. Without further ado, welcome home, Taji Amani. The floor is yours.
Thank you, guys. It's great to see y'all, by the way. I had to put on my Ujima stuff for the call today. Um, and yeah, Marty, that was a great breakdown. I really appreciate all the different elements that you included so efficiently. That was awesome. So I was sent a few questions that I can kind of answer. I have them in front of me.
Yep. I'll read all the first ones to you as well.
Okay, yeah.
Yep.
if someone wants to.
Yep. First one we had was just tell us a little bit more about yourself and Braden. What's an example of a business that you've helped in the city?
Okay. Yeah. So, Brett, that's my employer. I'm here representing myself for real, as an individual, but what I currently do for my job is, related to this passion of mine, which is working with cooperative businesses of different types, businesses that are advancing democratic control of economic assets. Um, it actually just started, my journey with that started with Ujima back in something like 2017 when we were reading about what Amadi just mentioned. When we were reading about Cooperation Jackson, they wrote this book called Jackson Rising. A subsequent book has come out recently from Cooperation Jackson, but that's when I first learned about what they were doing in Mississippi to build this three-pronged movement to change material conditions for Black people, but for all people in that area. And so that's when the idea of cooperatives, or a solidarity-based economy as a means of social transformation first entered my consciousness. Soon after that, I learned about what Black Yield Institute is doing here in South Baltimore. We've got the founder of Black Yield here on the call, Eric Jackson. And so Black Yield for what, 10, probably more than 10 years at this point, has been working on advancing Black land and food sovereignty in South Baltimore. And a big part of that uh, has to do with food cooperatives, right? So democratically owned and controlled food distribution processes. And there's more to it than just cooperatives, but that was, my spending several years working on that initiative as a volunteer. It taught me a lot about cooperatives. I also read Collective Courage by Dr. Jessica Gordon Nembard at the time, which kind of, supplemented my knowledge. And anyway, so that's kind of how I came to this stuff, cooperatives, this stuff, cooperatives. Um, so an example of some of the co-ops that we have, there's several, and that's important to know. Like these are not just like theoretical things. It's funny, you can tell people about, cooperative enterprise or cooperative business, and sometimes they think, oh, that could never work. You can't put workers in charge of a business. You can't put the consumers in charge of a business. They're just gonna run it for their own interest, and they're gonna tank the business. But these things exist and have existed for a while. I'm a lifelong member of my credit union, right? I belong to a credit union ever since my parents, signed me up to open up a bank account as a kid. That's an example of a cooperative. Um, it's a bank that is owned and controlled by the people in who have deposits in that bank, right? So CQ of Maryland, that is a cooperative, technically. Um, so that's one example. Other examples of co-ops, we've got housing cooperatives in Baltimore where the residents of a given set of apartments, they don't just live there and pay rent to a remote landlord. They own and control the corporate entity or the legal entity that owns the property. So the residents, they are co-owning and co-governing their residents. That's an example of a cooperative. There's several of those in Baltimore and in DC and all over the place. Um, there are coffee shops around the city that are owned, controlled, operated by the workers on a democratic basis. So these things are real, and they can, be in multiple sectors. Uh, Amadi just gave the example of Uber, right? So Uber, um, that's one way to make transportation available to people. But Uber is beholden to its shareholders, right? And pretty much nobody else. They will give lip service and try to make steps to maybe include other stakeholders in their version of stakeholder capitalism, what have you. But it hasn't really met the needs of the people who are doing the work, delivering, people and food items from place to place. And so, a vacuum has been left. And in that place, another organization called Drivers Co-op has come to pass. They're operating in a few different cities now. Um, there's talk about one being, propped up in Baltimore as well, but at least in New York, in Denver, and I think a couple other cities, there is a ride hailing app, a ride share app that is owned and controlled by the drivers, right? And so, and instead of the managers being responsive to those remote shareholders like they are in Uber, right? And the drivers make less and less and less. Um, in the drivers co-op, the drivers are actually making a little bit more than they would driving for Uber, right? So those are some examples of co-ops that are out there, you know.
That yeah, next one is you help businesses become worker-owned cooperatives. In this particular model, could you explain who makes decisions? How are profits shared? And how is that different from a regular business?
Yeah. So the way I think of it, I think of sort of like the corporate hierarchy that we typically hear about. At the top of the hierarchy are the financial shareholders, right? So people who tr typically in a non-cooperative typical business, if you put money in the business, you get to say what happens to the workers in that business, how the consumers consume that product, how you set up your internal operations. So at the top of that hierarchy are the shareholders. Then below that, you've got maybe a board of directors, right, that is responsible for overseeing the governance of the business, and they'll operate by the business's bylaws and determine how decisions are made in the business. That board will then hire a group of managers, right, that will oversee workers working in the business. And then below that, you've got workers, right? And so this hierarchy that it almost feels natural to people in the United States because it's just so pervasive. And a lot of people think that's the only way it can be. Um, but a cooperative kind of takes that hierarchy and flips it on its head, right? You can, put workers at the top of that hierarchy in a cooperative, right? Where the workers own and control the business. The workers elect their board of directors. So the workers are now delegating power downward to their board of directors, right? As opposed to say the board of directors saying, okay, this is how everything's going to go because we're at the top and we have the relationships with the shareholders. In a worker cooperative, kind of like the way the drivers co-op did it, they inverted that hierarchy. So the workers are now telling the board of directors, electing the board of directors and removing board directors as they like. Um, this is how things are going to go. We're going to elect you to do these things. If not, you're going to go. And then power flows down from the workers down. You can also set it up with consumers in charge, right? So that's kind of what a credit union does, and it's going to apply to any business in pretty much any industry. In a food co-op, for example, the food co-op we were working on with Black Yield Institute would put consumers and workers at the top, right? They would share decision making um, and delegate authority down to the board of directors as consumers. This is the kind of this is the kind of inventory that we want to see in the store. These are the types of even prices that we would like to aim for. Of course, factoring in, a cooperative, one business doesn't necessarily control the market in which it's operating. But groups of people can very intelligently consider both those external market forces and what their personal needs are and find the middle, right? It's not like managers and CEOs are the only people capable of doing this, right? And so basically a co-op takes that traditional corporate hierarchy, flips it on its head. And what I love about it and why I'm passionate about these types of enterprises is because what we're doing is we're moving the basis of power downward and we're distributing it more democratically, right? Which to me is more legitimacy, right? So that, yeah, I'll leave it there.
All right, that was great. That was great. So yeah, so next question one, you referenced housing costs earlier, right? But we wanted to, Baltimore has a lot of industrial, a lot of old industrial areas. There's a lot of old industries that used to be here. If we wanted to bring back, if we wanted to have something larger like a healthcare, you know what I'm saying? If we wanted to have an alternative to what we the for-profit version of healthcare system, can cooperatives work for those particular industries as well, or construction, anything like that, any type of big industry like that.
It could. I do think it could. I remember at a certain time I was wondering, hey, is there such a thing as like a as long as we're doing this healthcare insurance thing in the United States where we, like everybody's got to go to the doctor. You got to go to the doctor, and different types of doctors for different things. So it's odd that we sort of cede that territory. We give that power up to these insurance companies, these financial capitalists. Um, it's almost like the mafia. It's like, it'd be a shame if you if you got sick. It'd be a shame if you needed a checkup. It's like, you do. But what first comes to mind is mutual, what we call mutualism or mutual companies. Um, it's quite possible to set up an arrangement where consumers who need to see the doctor set up a mutual company that is owned by the consumers. Um, and they, uh, elect their board of directors, kind of like a cooperative. And this is something that actually gets discussed in that book, Collective Courage by Dr. Jessica Gordon Nembhard. A lot of recently uh, freed slaves, post-slavery in the United States, including in Baltimore, set up these mutualist healthcare arrangements so that we could afford to get healthcare, right? Um, so it can happen. It can definitely happen in that context. Yeah.
That's what's up. That's what's up. And yeah, so we wanted to point specifically to one of the things that was on the website for Bread was that you guys had helped the owners of the wine source in Hampton, which I've stepped through there a few times, give me a little drinky drink. So I'm just curious to know, what would convince an employee to sell a company? What would convince somebody that owns a company like the wine source to sell the business to the employees instead of just selling it to outside buyer? Is that something that we usually see? I'm just curious to know how that tends to happen.
So yeah, different. And we call that a co-op conversion. So in a traditionally owned business, the ownership decides that they're going to exit for whatever reason. It could be that they're just, getting ready for retirement, or they just want to cash out. That for whatever reason they're ready to give up ownership. They may or may not sell it to the employees or to their consumers as a cooperative. And their motivations can be different. Like I just named a couple of examples. Um, it's also worth noting that this can be gamed a little bit. What we do see actually lately, there are some, even just like private equity firms out there, like KKR, these massive, financial capitalist firms, so basically abusing this uh, movement for employee ownership, right? And they will, sometimes what they'll do is as that ownership of a business is changing hands, private equity will come in, provide financing and consulting, and even say, hey, we are going to give the employees ownership of the company in this process. And sometimes what that really means is that all the employees, instead of owning 100% of the company, or even just 51%, a controlling stake, what they're really doing is they're selling a few percentage points to the employees, so that as it changes hands, um, the employees can kind of cash out, and maybe they'll get a few $1,000s out of it, but they're not really gaining control, right? And so that's an example of a co-op conversion that is being co-opted, where the ownership is not really interested in putting their workers or their consumers in charge at the top of the hierarchy, right? So that's some transitions. But a lot of the times, you do see owners that are genuinely interested in, maybe they just like the idea of rewarding their employees or their consumers with ownership. They know that it has financial benefits. It can kind of, create a sense of community. Sometimes it can. But it's also important to notice that cooperatives in and of themselves are not inherently socialist. They're not inherently uh, anti-imperialist, or they're not inherently attached to any movements, right? So you can have cooperatives that, a business gets sold to the employees, and they share decision-making power, but that's about it. They're not really, maybe looking at the bigger picture, connecting with other cooperatives. And then you have co-ops that very much do, that are very much, working with unions, um, in order to build power for workers in their region. And so on. But yeah, that would be a co-op conversion, and it's different motivations for different owners.
Appreciate it, Taji. Yeah, we're going to actually have like a short little 4 minute video to go deep into what Taji mentioned about how cooperatives, as good as they are and as good as they can be, are actually they don't guarantee socialism. It's another form of how workers are set up. So, last question, Taji: what are one or two simple, concrete things that everyday Baltimore resident can do to support Bread's work, or start thinking about worker ownership in their own job?
Well, yeah, my employer, Bread, is one organization that's working on this. Um, Yeah, presently, one thing that's coming up with Baltimore City's Taxpayer Night on May 14th, if you want to give testimony, a lot of us are asking the city council to actually allocate public dollars for worker cooperative development, right? I would say it's very much underinvested in the city. So, if you're interested, I can hopefully connect with you, give you the information how to like sign up to give testimony. It could be written or you could go there in person. My message to them is, like look at what happened when at the during the Baltimore's sort of deindustrialization period, right? When all those steel companies and big companies kind of just like up and bounced from Baltimore. Some of my great uncles managed to get employed at some of those businesses, despite some of the racist labor dynamics. Some of them, overcame that when they were able to be employed by some of those companies. But when those companies left, like a lot of Rust Belt cities, uh, it meant economic downturn for the community, right? And to me, that's because both the public policy of the city, the state of Maryland, is so biased in favor of investor controlled businesses. It's just such a norm for us that whoever put the money in is calling the shots, and that's how you get the 1% running everything. And so when those investors are ready to, take their business to China, take their business to the next state over where labor is cheaper or where regulations is cheaper, it's easier to exploit workers in the environment, that leaves the community in an economic bind. And so, what I'm telling city council in my little 2 minute testimony is that if we want to actually like put our public dollars into industry that can be sustainable and actually empower folks, and move the basis of power, like I said, downward and distribute it more democratically, cooperatives, employee-owned businesses are a great way to do that, right? Because you can imagine if all of us work at I don't know, let's say we all work at Under Armour, right? If let's say there's an opportunity for Under Armour to move its operations to Asia because costs are cheaper over there. Um, they're not going to do that if the company is owned and controlled by us, the workers, right? Or if we all worked at um, Amazon, right? Maybe at an Amazon warehouse. As it stands, you don't get paid much as a worker. All that money goes to the investors of Amazon, the few people in the country who own stocks, the billionaires like Jeff Bezos. Um, but as a cooperative, the workers get to determine what happens with that profit, what happens with that surplus, and basically more wealth would get kept here in the region if employees and workers owned and controlled more of these companies. So you can testify on taxpayer night, if you want to do that. But then there are also other just cooperative initiatives happening, right? So my employer isn't the only place doing this. Black Yield Institute has been a leader in this. And there are several just independent efforts to build cooperatives in the city, including Black-led cooperatives, which is important.
Thanks, I really appreciate that, man. That was incredible, and I'm always a fan of your work, man. And just if I don't tell you enough, man, I appreciate you for always supporting
Likewise,
Ujima. And
man.
just
Appreciate you.
yeah,
Likewise.
man, like always good to see the work you're doing, man. It's incredible. So yeah, thanks again, man. Now we're going next. We're going to talk to some folks on Baltimore Public Power. Just want to give you an idea who they are. Ujima is also a part of that and a big support as well. The Baltimore Public Power Campaign is a grassroots campaign in the city of Baltimore to transition away from Baltimore Gas and Electric, aka BGE, aka the devil, aka the Great Satan, to a publicly owned utility. And today we're going to have and presenting on behalf of the Baltimore Public Power Campaign is a very good friend of mine who I've known also from Black Yield a long time. And shout out to Eric once again, the brother Eric, who all these connections are coming through from the Black Yield. So want to introduce my friend Lolly Medina, and she'll be presenting on behalf of Baltimore Public Power. And Gus, you can take it away.
Okay. Hi, can y'all see me? Or wait, no, y'all have the okay.
Yeah, we can see
Hi
you.
everyone. Yeah, my name is Citlali Medina. And I am a concerned citizen in Baltimore, and just want to get some thumbs up if people are feeling the ick with BGE and feeling that pain with BGE with everything that's going on. We are not alone. This is a national issue. So I just want to talk a little bit about this really grassroots effort that is happening in the city, right? So next slide, please. Ooh.
Oh, I'm sorry.
All right. So what is the bottom? Oh, okay. So what is the Baltimore Public Power Campaign? Yeah, so this has been a very grassroots movement. We're getting more folks involved every day, every week. And really the main goal is to transition our investor-owned utility company, the BGE, and transition it to a publicly owned and controlled infrastructure, right? And I don't know if folks know this. BGE is owned by a conglomerate, investor-owned conglomerate, mainly private equity, that is headquartered in Illinois. We've been getting a lot of rate hikes. Our political establishment thinks that $150 for the year is going to, protect us from having our power turned off. So this is really, in addition, this is an issue of sovereignty as well. Next slide. So why public power, right? So not for profit. Most of what we're paying now is really going to shareholder interests, right? And they are finessing Maryland's system to be able to charge us more rates, do infrastructure modifications and improvements that aren't necessary, but allow them to charge us more. So that's the component of the local control, right? Low cost, community owned, reliable. Next slide, please. So this is not anything new, right? That what we're doing here now is not, some impossible feat. There are over 2,000 public power institutions in the country. And, in some cities like Los Angeles, San Antonio, even Florida, right? And Tennessee. So this is not something that is just pie in the sky. This is a real campaign and effort that can really bring back local control. And we have access to resources and knowledge bases and relationships outside of Maryland that can help us with this effort. Next slide, please. And we do have a pathway, right? So this first phase is establishing an additional entity, right? A public power authority. And then the other aspect of this first phase, which is within this year, next year, is building microgrid pilots, which Maryland does have some legal infrastructure to allow this to happen. But really, walking through these phases, at the end of the day, we want folks to feel confident enough in a public power authority to phase out BGE and their monopoly, and really Exelon, and uh, renew an imagination of what a public power institution and infrastructure can look like. And some things that have been visioned, right, is how do we look at our schools and just public buildings that could have solar mount arrays that can sell to the surrounding community. BGE and Exelon will never do that kind of project or investment. And actually, to this day, they have been very antagonistic towards even renewable energies being more incorporated into our grid. So this is just a huge aspect of why local control is the best way to go. It's not just about the lower costs, it's about reimagining our relationship to our power and gas infrastructure. Next slide, please. So how do we win? This is the David versus Goliath struggle. They have billions and billions of dollars. But we have people power, we have relationships, and folks are pissed. I mean, I'm pissed. I saw some thumbs up. I know people are pissed about this. So there is a methodology and a framework for us to be able to win this, right? So support from elected officials. We've gotten folks that are campaigning right now for these midterm elections to not receive donations from BGE and Exelon. There's public support, union support, where we'll need a lot of resources and labor to go into the regulatory landscape. It's very complex. There is Baltimore's grid, then there's the broader Maryland grid, right? So Baltimore City, Baltimore County, and then there's also the regional grid. And so this is an all hands on deck effort. And next slide, please. And so just for governance, we were talking about cooperatives. There are cooperative energy companies that exist mainly in Oklahoma, but there's also one in the Eastern Shore of Maryland. There's also the local government, right? So I think a good frame of reference is our water utility is public, so we already have kind of an understanding of what that looks like. So there is a piece of this campaign that will look into the different forms of public power or of public ownership of this really critical utility. And then the next couple slides is what can we do? So we'll go to this next one. Yes. So there are a variety of ways to get involved. Amadi and myself are very involved in the organizing around the public power campaign. If you could do digital engagements, hounding our council members and political establishment. Also come and learn with us. We have teach-ins at Red Emma's mainly, but I know that there'll be efforts to do socials so folks can meet each other. And then there's obviously the virtual offerings. And then at the very least, just talk about this with your friends, your neighbors, family members. The more that we can help folks vision a world without these for-profit corporate energy and gas utilities, I don't want to say the easier it gets, but the more likely folks can get on board with action items, deliverables and getting and putting practice to power. And then the last slide, we have different groups. If you want to get involved, you can email Amadi or myself, and I can put my contact information in the chat. We do have a communications team, so this is really the space in designing content, designing informational items to be spread to the community. We also have the tech group. And so this is the what are all of the technical elements that go with an energy utility? What are the things that need to be understood, right? So this is the grid, the microgrid, and what are the elements that are used to charge us more or less. The organizing group, this is really the community-centered group, right? This is folks going out into different spaces, whether that be neighborhood associations. I just came from mine, East Arlington, so I got to speak with Malcolm Ruff. And so this is, if you feel that your talents are more geared towards talking to people and getting, really complex information and being able to deliver it to larger spaces, community spaces, spaces for joy. That group is for you. And then the policy group is, as I discussed earlier, really analyzing the legal infrastructure, right? There is the local governance and local ordinances in Baltimore, but then that also has an interplay with state level legislation, right? And this is also a space where we can propose legislative items for elected officials to move forward to bring in those spaces. So that is it. That is. I hope to see more folks. Oh yeah, Pepco is unionized, but it's still owned by Exelon. Just a heads up. So this giant is, and they are digging their heels in. And with the data centers, this is just a recipe for disaster, y'all. So we would love to have engagement. And yeah, thank you. Thank you for the time.
Thank you so much, Lottie. Really appreciate your work on this. Really appreciate you stepping in the last moment. We had to work some things around, but Lottie came through. Really appreciate you on doing that. And yeah, Gus, you can take over the next version, the next portion.
Okay, our icebreaker questions. The first one was are socialist atheists? Somebody give me what answer you got there?
Myth.
Chime on in. Anybody?
Myth.
Hell
Myth.
no.
Anybody say they are? Okay. That's a myth. I mean, obviously some people could be, but it's a broad brush to kind of turn people off. It's part of the propaganda piece. And sadly, there are people who engage in this kind of propaganda who don't even know they're doing it. But socialists consider religion a private matter and actively fight against discrimination on the basis of religion. Even Marx never called for the banning of religion. He pointed out how historically religious institutions have discouraged people from fighting against oppression. They instruct poor and working people to wait instead for a better life. So when you heard the phrase opium of the people, that's kind of where that comes from. But so that was a myth. Okay, the next
Hey
question.
Gus, can I mention one thing? But to
Go ahead,
that
go
point,
ahead, go ahead.
I think one of the most important things to realize is that one of the first somewhat famous black socialists in America was a preacher. His name was George Washington Woodbay. So he was a preacher back in the early 1900s, an ex-slave, and he used the Bible as the basis for why he was a socialist. So he looked through the Bible and looked at I ain't gonna try to quote the Bible. It's been a long time since I've been in that, but it was certain scriptures that he pointed to that pointed to the fact that the Bible and the gospel spoke towards a much fairer distribution of our resources than we have now. So, black socialism and black church has been kind of tied at the hip for a long, long time.
All right, all right.
Yep. And if
Kind
I may add,
Go ahead,
and if I,
Robert.
and if I may add, as a lay minister and theologian myself, just like Karl Marx said that, like, each according to their own needs. Micah 4:4 says, "So all may enjoy their own vineyards and rest under their own fig tree." That is like basically the equivalent of Karl Marx's Communist Manifesto, each according to their own needs. And even Acts 2 basically says like everyone lived and shared everything in common and all was equal.
Oh, we
That's
just I forgot we had the preacher over there. Go. All right, brother. All right. All right. Here's the next question. Socialists only care about class oppression, not other forms of oppression. True or false?
false.
And you can add nuance if you'd like. because I have met some people who are that way. But go ahead, Robert. Did you want to?
Yeah, so basically, the reason why I say it's false is because when one understands the history of socialism, that especially within the context of the United States and even in Latin America, they understand that there is a race-based component. They understand that there is a gender component, and there's also the disability justice component when it comes to socialism. Because quite frankly, we have to understand because we understand within, especially from the Black socialist context is that in order to be socialist, you have to be anti-imperialist because we understand that you have to be anti-colonialist. And that also means showing solidarity with other oppressed groups, especially with our indigenous brothers and sisters when it comes to the issue of land back. So that's why I
Hmm,
say like, us only caring about class is false. Yes, class is a part of it, but it's not the only issue we care about.
okay,
And to
all
your
right.
point about disabled and how that figures into once again, I'm a history nerd, so I always got like a little tidbit or fact. Was a famous Black Panther named Brad Lomax. And Brad Lomax, it was actually he suffered from MS and he was wheelchair bound. He was one of the main people that actually led one of the longest sit-ins of a federal building in U.S. history. His name was Brad Lomax. He was a Black Panther. So the Black people and Black socialism has intertwined all these different aspects to really just make it robust. So yeah, I just want to point to that little history. So look him up, Brad Lomax, Section 504, major disability rights legislation.
All right. Okay. The last question was socialism has no historical roots in the United States.
That's false.
Go ahead, Robert.
That's totally false because when you look not only at indigenous practices, let's be very clear, like, when we look at the Iroquois Confederacy, you have a rich history of like socialism. Like even pre-Civil War, you had what was called utopian socialism, where Christians and Christian socialists were actually coming together and forming like these towns, like in places like Texas, Arkansas, Florida, excuse me. So this is pre-Civil War, and even during the 1700s, like you had the Quakers, you had some Quaker settlements that would be considered like, socialism. And a random fact, because I'm also a history nerd as well, during the 1780s, Rhode Island was considered radical for its time because they practiced a form of agrarian socialism where farmers and fishermen actually had a say. So like that's actually so to say that like there's no history of socialism is totally false. So
That false it is. Let me read the the response we got. Socialists have been consistent in dedicating in and dedicated participants in all major struggles in the U.S. working class has engaged in. Some of the main socialist holidays, International Workers' Day and International Women's Day, began in the United States. First unions were established by radicals who wanted to abolish capitalism. During the Great Depression, socialists were leaders in the labor movement and organized the unemployed. In the 1960s, leading figures of the struggles against racism, war, sexism recognized that only socialism could put a final end to these injustices. So there you have it. We have all right. And we're moving into the questions period now. Abasi, you have a question.
Yeah, I'm sorry, real quick, in reference to that question, I'm a little old and rusty, but wasn't it the Iroquois who introduced social I forgot the name of the dude from Europe that when he visited America, he was all shocked as far as the social relations of the Iroquois, but I was under the impression that was one of the first, I mean, I guess a testament that, you know, socialism was already here
It's
in
already here.
America.
That's a good question. I don't know actually. Anybody want to
The
respond?
Iroquois,
The
right?
Iroquois.
So I put it in the chat. I'm not even gonna try to pronounce that word. It's the hot the that word that I just put in the chat.
Hadanasi.
There you go. Appreciate that. They are the ones that, and I'm sure
Confederacy.
Robert probably know more information, but their confederacy and the way they organize their societies was a lot of the Constitution. I think Ho Chi Minh also based some of
Mhm.
his anti colonial fight against the principles that they laid out. But Robert, if you got some, please let me know.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll chime in. So, like with Ho Chi Minh, he was influenced by the Constitution, which was influenced by like the Haudenosaunee confederacies. It was called the Pact. Like, it's a long name, but basically it's shortened to the Pact. But basically, it highlights the system of governance, the balance and the sharing of power. You even have not just Ho Chi Minh, but even Benjamin Franklin when they were actually formulating the Constitution, because they were replacing the Articles of Confederation. He was saying like, look, let's. He says the Iroquois peoples already have something. Why don't we just take what the Iroquois are already doing and just transplant it how we want to do it here? Now, of course, they watered it down to where there's the three-fifths compromise, and only if you were white and have property you could vote and serve in public office. But the foundation was there. It was like taken from the Haudenosaunee Confederacy.
I didn't know that. That's good. That's good. Good stuff.
And
Other
only
questions?
and only given to white men.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I said that.
White men with what white men of privilege,
Well,
correct?
white men, yeah, white men with privilege and property. Yep.
All right.
Jesus.
Any other questions? This is a question period now. Go ahead. Ask any question you want. Questions you're afraid to ask, afraid of getting laughed at by capitalists. You can ask it here.
Hey, who wants to buy out their boss? For real though, that's the thing, like if you and your fellow employees are like, you know what, I know ownership is gonna change soon where I work. It's like, me and the people where I work, we could buy it, we could buy the business. That's a halfway serious question, but it's something to think about.
But so the
Well,
idea is we got to think beyond the boundaries we've been kind of propagandized to think within. And I know you hear the phrase "think outside of the box." But that's real. That's real because otherwise you're going to be limited to what your experience has been and what you've been propagandized with. And we've all been doing it. If you've been born here, you've all been subject to it. So, other questions?
and to Tadi's point, why everybody's coming to other questions. There was in Argentina, I believe, back when I think it's like the probably the 90s, I believe, they were a lot of factories were shutting down. And so instead of the workers allowing the factories to shut down, the workers just occupied the factories. And they decided that we're not going to let the bosses just take away our livelihood. We know how to run the factories. We know how to do things. We know how to coordinate this across industries. So we're going to take everything over. And you see that happening throughout history. It happened during the understudy revolution was the Spanish Revolution, and it happened like the 30s and for the Franco I think pre World War II, I believe, or after World War One. A lot of what they did over there is that they organized themselves into a giant labor confederation called the CNT FAI. And during the revolution, as they were defending themselves from Franco and the fascists, they also just started to take over industries. Like they saw land, and then when they came through, the peasants just took the land over, decided they even include the old landlords that actually were over the land. The landlords realized that they were better off joining with the peasants and distributing land and having it equally than just getting their heads lopped off. So they decided, let's join in with the peasants and let's make sure, our land is equally distributed. And so you had a lot of these instances throughout history where people just decided that the only thing that's stopping us from taking over this is not this the system in place as it is, but there's a change in the mindset that has to happen for you to decide that my workplace should be mine and my coworkers, and that my home should be mine, and the rest of people that live here. And then there's, that they took this over, the capitalists took this over by sheer determination. They decided one day that we wanted the land, and so they enclosed it. They decided to put fences around, and those fences were guarded by guards. And so for them, they just decided one day that we're going to exercise our force to do this. And so, I hope part of this discussion today is that we realize what our power is as workers, and how, we're the ones that make all this turn and make all this run, and that we, if we sit in our hands one day, this all stops. And so we have the power to basically bring all this down to a halt and take over things where we need to. But it takes organization. Sorry, guys, go ahead.
No problem. No problem. There's a question in the chat. How can we stage organizing here to create something like an Mondragon, which is the collection of co-ops in Spain, correct? Anybody want to try to tackle that one? It's a big
Yes.
one, but Miss Medina.
I let you just confirm what the module ground is. But if anybody has any idea, the question about, how we stage organizing here, it would start off again. This is if we want to go historically. Labor unions, the labor unions have been pieces of that. Labor unions, because the workers are already organized and have their labor organized in a particular type of way. The idea that anarcho-syndicalists, which are like the radical revolutionary labor unions, what they did is they decided that if we have all these workers that are organized across these industries, that we're the ones that can coordinate industry as it stands. So we can kick the bosses out if we have people that are organized in this particular factory, if we have people organized at the truckers, if we have the dock workers organized, which is how big the organization was. They had over 1 million workers that were organized in this one big labor federation. And so when the time came and the opportunity presented itself, the already organized labor just took things over. They kicked the bosses out because they already had things organized beforehand. So if we want to talk about what it would take to do that, Baltimore has one of the lowest unionized percentages in the country. The word, the America in general is not as organized as it used to be. And so as a working class organization, as Ujima is, we have teachers, we have people that are in labor unions in our organization. So it's our job to teach folks how do you organize your block? How do you organize your job? There's resources available that teach you. I'm a part of the IWW. We have our own resource that can teach folk how to organize on your job because it has to start from there. And it doesn't matter if you work in the office. I used to work remote, and then one of the things about working remote is that if you shut your laptop, the work stop. The work stop, and then if you and all your coworkers shut your laptops, ain't no work getting done. And so a lot of it is realizing where do we live at as workers on this global supply chain, and what are those choke points? If you're a dock worker, your choke point is the dock. There's $80 billion that comes through Baltimore every single year. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of economics that can be stopped if we organize folks in the way that we could. So unionizing, organizing folks at the community level, at the grassroots level. If you want to look at unemployment insurance, if you want to look at anything that we've gotten as a community, it's been from organized everyday folk putting pressure on the systems that be. And we want instead of just allowing the Democrats, Republicans to absorb this energy and make it so that they can just dissipate it. We want to make sure we go the next step. We want to make sure we take these energies over as working people, control them ourselves.
Taji's question is next. I just wanted to add, um, strongly encourage y'all to take a look at our letter in response to the Supreme Court vote around Louisiana. And we just mentioned, in other words, the gist of it is this work is necessary regardless to whether we have a strong Voting Rights Act or not. We got to do the work anyway. So yeah, it's a bad decision, unjust, but we got to do this work from the ground up. It's not going to come from the top down. So, Taji, floor is yours.
Yeah, to the Mondragon question, I think a lot of that has to do with public policy. I think I've asked some people who I know have gone to Spain and looked at what they do in Mondragon, and I asked what sorts of policies do they have in place to allow cooperatives to scale on to that degree, where they've got hundreds of businesses operating in a cooperative fashion. And then other co-ops like outside of Mondragon, like I think expanding the range of ideas that politicians are even thinking about is important, or just getting new people in there. So for example, actually, to the question, we have Andy Ellis here who put a question in, and Andy, who's running for governor in the state of Maryland as a Green, has been thinking about, how do you get resources to unemployed workers, right? I also think that's a matter of public policy. So in Italy, I recently learned they have a policy where I think if it's 10 unemployed people, um, find each other, come together, they can qualify for public funding to start a cooperative business, right? And so I think that also speaks to the point that, co-ops in and of themselves are not the whole package. There is a thing where I think cooperatives kind of get, fetishized, blown up to being totally transformative. They can be transformative, but they do need a public policy framework to support them. And in fact, W.B. Du Bois, who spent his life researching cooperatives, participating in cooperatives, trying to use them as a tool for transforming Black people's lives, at the end of his life, and I learned this from Dr. Jared Ball at Morgan State in his podcast, at the end of Du Bois's life, reflecting on these cooperative movements, he realized in order for cooperatives to truly be transformative, you need public policy, and that is called socialism, right? So this is the conclusion of W.E. Du Bois. So, something like guaranteed employment by the government. That's one way to support unemployed workers, and then public policy that allows unemployed people to form cooperative businesses. So you're not just replicating this 1% concentrated ownership model of doing business, right? Yeah, thanks.
All right, now we got about 5 minutes left. I'm going to ask Savon's question, and then Cassandra is next. If y'all give us 5 more minutes for just an announcement, we greatly appreciate it. Savon's question was, can a society be socialist and capitalist at the same time? Anybody want to jump on that one?
I got a couple things
Go
about
ahead.
that. I do think most economies are blended to some degree, I would say. Even, you look at China, people like to malign that as red communist China. I don't think that's a bad word, but a lot of people do.
Yeah.
In China, they'll say, "Oh, that's just state capitalism," right? And I think people characterize it that way because they're learning about Chinese socialism from American capitalist media. I think the way they describe it is socialism with Chinese characteristics, because every manifestation of socialism or capitalism has a certain local context. And so, sure, they have some billionaires. They will allow some degree of private ownership of industry, but it is highly regulated and limited. Um, and the government still maintains control of what the commanding heights of the economy, right? Some of the more instrumental parts of the economy, the government has a lot of say in that. So you could say that that is a kind of a blended economy. Um, one another way I think about this, um, even in socialist thought, right? You have different approaches, right? So you have a top-down approach where the state, the government, um, issues directives, and that is simply what happens, and the public follows that. But you also have bottom-up approaches, more like anarchic type approaches, where
Nicaragua.
sorry, what was that?
Nicaragua.
Nicaragua, I think Venezuela is
Venezuela.
to do it from kind of trying to do it from both ends. They recognize the Chavistas recognize that the traditional electoral system just isn't meeting the needs of the workers, and so they want to build, cooperatives, but not just cooperatives, communes, at the local level where people kind of almost like people's assemblies, like they're trying to build in Jackson, Mississippi, where people are coming together to make decisions hyper locally, and then they kind of federate that up, from the bottom up. Um, so just like you have like kind of like a blend of between socialism and capitalism in a lot of economies, I personally think we need to move, I would love to see more and more of our economy socialistically controlled from the bottom up. It's not going to be like an overnight thing necessarily. There's also there's also a spectrum within socialism itself. Yeah, I'll leave it there.
Okay. All right, Cassandra, this is the last question, unfortunately, and then we have a few announcements. Cassandra, the floor is yours.
Greetings, family. My name's Cassandra. I'm joining from out in LA, and unfortunately, I got on this call late. But I find the conversation that's happening right now really timely and interesting. I just withdrew my candidacy to run for mayor of Los Angeles last month. And actually, let me see what I'm trying to do here. Okay. And yeah, okay. And the reason that I withdrew my candidacy was because this whole concept of free and fair elections in the United States is a myth. Okay.
Yep.
And so although I had been on the ballot since December, come February, they create another process that once you are approved, once you meet all the benchmarks to become a candidate. They tell you that all you need to do is live in the city a certain period of time, and what else, and be, a U.S. citizen, right? That's not true, right? I had to jump through multiple hoops to get on the ballot. And then the last hoop is, at the last minute, they tell you that you have to get so many signatures to sponsor you to remain on the ballot. You got 2 weeks to get 1,000 signatures to stay on the ballot. So you meet all the benchmarks to get on the ballot, right? And then they throw this last hoop in to cull the herd, if you will, right? It's important for me to open that way, especially in light of the last conversation, the last discussion that the brother Taji was talking about in response to the question of, can capitalism and socialism or communism coexist? And the answer is no. I'm just telling you. I'm just going to give it to you blood raw. The answer is no. And the previous discussion, I will say this, because right now what I'm trying to win with people is that Los Angeles and California is the litmus test for what these motherfuckers can get away with over the next period. And don't nobody have that conversation. Ain't nobody trying to have that conversation. So it's still all the people that are still in the campaign, that are being promoted as being on the campaign, are still having these bullshit ass discussions about what I intend to do about homelessness, what I intend to do about the police, what I intend to do to help people get jobs is bogus. We watched this negress, Karen Bass, be the first black female mayor of Los Angeles and run this city into the goddamn ground while white wealthy people are golf clapping everything she does. You understand what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. The answer is no. And so I started with a local context because I'm telling you, man, they are intending to gut this shit. And for us to still be having the same conversation as if law matters, as if the vote matters, this motherfucker that just took possession of the entire country, we literally watched a violent coup. That's what it was. The vote that happened in November of 2024 was not a nonviolent coup. It was a straight up hostile takeover of the state. And what happened was, in the context of taking over the state, we watched this motherfucker come out the gate attacking those that they hate most and attempting to walk back every single solitary inch of what looked like democracy that black people won this country. Mm. The only reason this country looks progressive is because of black people in general and black women in particular. Nobody want to have that conversation. And he was crystal clear about who his assault was on because he knew everybody else would get on board with it. He knew everybody else would remain silent while he snatched away 650,000 jobs of black women in this goddamn country who have remained the foundation that allows black people to continue to progress in this country. Then he turned around about a month later, and every job that is, quote, silently whispering black bitch job, these the jobs black bitches take. The educational jobs, like nursing, healthcare, all the different levels of healthcare that we know are dominated by black women. He said, y'all can't get no more education. Y'all got too much education, too many damn degrees. We're going to have to snatch that shit back too. And because nobody is talking about black women, because nobody is talking about the impact of attacking black women and the trickle-down effect that it's going to have, not trickle-down, reverberating impact that it's going to have on black people in general, because it was just us, everybody was silent. Everybody was silent while he did that. I'm going to round out in 2 seconds. Everybody was silent while he did that. And while he did that, that was the shot that he fired to speak his dog whistle to the white nationalists in this country. That was it. Because not 4 months after that, then you see the attack on Hispanic people in the forms of the deepening of the ICE raids throughout this country that started right here in Los Angeles. This shit looked like a goddamn war zone when that shit happened. Do you understand me? And I'll shut up. 2 seconds. The question is not whether socialism and communism and capitalism can coexist. any opportunity for that to be the case for the United States of America, we have to accept is gone. The other thing, in my personal opinion, now we us up in here, but my personal opinion is we watched a 39-time convicted felon become the president of the United States. And as a consequence of watching a 39-time convicted felon become the president of the United States, we are still attempting to have a conversation within the context of this idea, this myth that we believe that law matters. We believe that what's legal matters. When he is telling you and other white people who are responding accordingly, listen, all that shit we was telling y'all about the law and what you can and can't do and how you can and can't break the law, that wasn't for y'all. Okay, so y'all do what y'all do, but everybody else, we know these colored folks we gonna still color within the lines. We still gonna
Man,
be
man,
depressed.
we really have to move on. I
Okay,
appreciate your
I'm done.
comments. I respect it. Just we already over a little bit. But on your point, as far as black women, one announcement is tomorrow night at 7 o'clock, PACA, Pan African Community Action, is having their political education, and it's going to be centered around just what Miss Floyd was talking about in terms of how these employment issues are disproportionately affecting black women. There's no question about that. Okay. Um, Also, we spoke about Cooperation Jackson. I don't know how many of you know, but a comrade of ours, Kali Akuna, is experiencing some health issues. And so, if you know of him, I think it would be really good to reach out because he's really in need of some assistance, some support in this particular period of time. Um, on Sunday, there's Malcolm X Day, and this is again Pan African Community Action. This is going to be at Anacostia Park on Sunday from 12 to 5. They're re-establishing Malcolm X Day, a commemoration that went on in DC for many years. They've re-established it, and the next to last announcement is the Bethesda African Cemetery Coalition, of which one of our comrades, Robert, is on the line here. They should be congratulated. Apparently, the governor of Maryland is about to sign an anti-cemetery desecration law, and they've worked a lot for this. We've tried to be in support of them as much as possible, so they should be congratulated on their efforts. It's been a long road, and there's a lot of fighting ahead, but the work is coming, and that's from the ground up. We're not complimenting Wes Moore. All right, he's trying to get some credit back for not signing the reparations thing. But anyway, we're not going to go on that one. All right. And the last announcement is June 9th. June 9th, which is that's going to be the date of our next political education session. Um, and we'll get the word out to you the same way we did this time. You'll get it out. We'll get it out at least about 2 weeks ahead of time. And we just want to thank everyone for showing up. Tell everybody about what we're trying to do. We're trying to build from the ground up, and we greatly need your support. And if you're interested in joining the Ujima People's Progress Party, please reach out to myself or Amadi. We're always looking for members. There's more than enough work to go around. Okay.
I dropped the membership form in the chat for anybody's interested in joining. It all starts with everything that we talked about today. It all starts with us talking to each other, talking to our neighbors, talking to our friends, and realizing what power we have as working class people to change our situation. And we don't have to wait for the politicians to do it for us. We can do it ourselves. So I just appreciate everybody who came through tonight. Thank you all for everybody stayed around to the end. And uhuru, everybody. Appreciate y'all.
Uhuru. If you're interested in the recording of this to share with others, let us know.
Uhuru Sasa, y'all.
All
Thank you,
right.
everybody. Thank you for
Peace.
this great work.
We'll debrief on Sunday.
Gotcha. Yep.
All right. Well done, my friend.
Hey, Savon, drop your email in the chat, and I'll send you the form.
Turnout too. Great turnout.
I'll leave it open.
All right, I'm gonna jump off, guys.
I'll leave it open just in case you need it.
Peace.
Now, where's Savon from anyway? DC. Okay. Brother Mickey, how you doing?
Doing well. Thanks for sending me the link. Appreciate it.
Nah, no problem, no problem. I'm gonna get out to Kansas City, man. I'm
Okay.
gonna see. I want to see you play, and I'm gonna go to the the Negro League.
Come on out, bro. Anytime.
Yeah, and you can show me the best barbecue spot too now.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
All right,
we know for that. Yeah. All right, I'm gonna cut out, bro. Hey, thanks a lot, man. That was really good.
all right. Thanks, comrade.
Okay.
You still on, Namdi? Ah, he
Yeah,
probably won't. Okay, all right.
I'm looking around a little bit, but yeah. All right, I'm about to go, man. Good class tonight, bro.
All right, brother.
Take care.
You too.